There is a specific kind of person who cannot go to sleep if there is a dish in the sink. Not because the dish is disgusting, not because anyone is going to see it, but because something inside them will not rest until the kitchen looks the way it is supposed to look. You probably know someone like this. Maybe it is you. And here is the strange part. Most people assume this is about hygiene, about tidiness, about being a little uptight, a little controlling, maybe even a little boring. But that is not what is actually happening. What is actually happening is something much deeper and much more human than anyone gives it credit for. Because the person who wipes the counter after every meal, who cannot relax with cushions out of place, who reorganizes their desk before starting any real work, is not simply cleaning a room. They are managing something inside their own mind. Think about it. Have you noticed that the moment life feels unpredictable, the first thing many people do is clean something? A breakup happens, and suddenly the closet gets reorganized. A stressful week at work, and the kitchen gets scrubbed at midnight. An uncertain diagnosis, and someone finds themselves alphabetizing their bookshelf at 2 in the morning. That is not a coincidence. That is psychology showing its hand. Here is what nobody talks about. Cleanliness, for a lot of people, is not really about the environment. It is about control. And control, to the human brain, feels like safety. When your external world feels chaotic, your internal world starts to feel chaotic too. Your brain does not separate the two as cleanly as you would think. A messy space can quietly register in the nervous system as unfinished business, as unresolved tension, as a small ongoing alarm that never fully turns off. So when someone straightens a stack of papers or lines up their shoes by the door, they are not just hiding. They are sending a signal to their own brain. A signal that says, this part of my world, at least, is under control. Now here is the strange part. This need for order often has almost nothing to do with the object being cleaned. Psychologists who study anxiety and behavior have noticed a pattern. People with a strong need for order tend to have brains that are constantly scanning for threat, constantly predicting what might go wrong next. This is not weakness. It is actually a highly attentive nervous system, one that evolved to notice small deviations from normal. Because for most of human history, a small deviation from normal could mean danger. A rustle in the grass, a change in a familiar path, a shift in someone's tone of voice. Our ancestors who paid close attention to these small changes were more likely to survive. And that same wiring thousands of years later is still running quietly in the background of your mind. Except now, instead of scanning the horizon for predators, it scans your kitchen counter for crumbs. Imagine your brain as a control room with 1,000 blinking lights. Every object out of place, every unfinished task, every open loop is one more light that stays lit, demanding a small amount of attention. Most people do not consciously notice these lights, but some brains are far more sensitive to them than others. For people with a strong need for cleanliness, an untidy room is not just visually messy. It is a room full of blinking lights, and their nervous system does not fully relax until those lights go out. This is where dopamine enters the story. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure. It is not really. Dopamine is the chemical of anticipation and completion. It is released not just when you get something you want, but when you finish something you started. That is why crossing an item off a list feels satisfying even if the item was small. That is why wiping down a counter until it shines gives a tiny hit of relief. Your brain registers the closed loop, the completed task, and rewards you for it. For someone who cleans compulsively, this reward cycle can become incredibly powerful. Every wiped surface, every organized drawer, every folded towel becomes a small, repeatable source of relief. In a world that often feels unpredictable and overwhelming, cleaning offers something rare, a guaranteed outcome. You do the action, you get the result. There is no ambiguity, no waiting, no uncertainty. And in a life full of things you cannot control, that certainty can feel like oxygen. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Some psychologists believe that our relationship with order actually begins far earlier than we realize, often in childhood. Think about a child who grew up in an unpredictable home. Maybe a parent's mood shifted without warning. Maybe the emotional temperature of the house could change in an instant. A child in that environment often cannot control the people around them. They cannot control the shouting, the silence, the tension in the air. But they can control their room. They can make their bed exactly the same way every single day. They can line up their toys in a row. They can keep their small corner of the world predictable, even when nothing else is. Researchers who study childhood development suggest this kind of behavior can become a coping mechanism that quietly follows someone into adulthood. The child grows up, moves out, builds their own life, but the nervous system still remembers. And so the adult, without even realizing why, still finds a strange comfort in orderly spaces, still feels unsettled by mess, still associates a clean environment with emotional safety. It is not about being neat. It is about recreating a feeling of control that once felt out of reach. Have you noticed how some people describe cleaning as meditative? How they say it clears their head? That is not just a figure of speech. Repetitive physical tasks, like folding laundry or wiping a surface in slow circular motions, can lower activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and threat. At the same time, these tasks can increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, focus, and calm decision-making. In simple terms, cleaning can genuinely quiet an anxious brain. It gives the mind something structured and predictable to focus on, which interrupts spiraling thoughts. This is one reason people often say their best ideas come to them while cleaning. The hands are busy with something simple, and the mind, freed from decision fatigue, starts to wander somewhere useful. But wait, if cleanliness can be so calming, why does it sometimes become exhausting instead? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. For some people, the need for order stops being a source of comfort and becomes a source of pressure. The clean home is no longer a place to relax. It becomes another obligation to maintain, another standard to meet, another way to measure whether they are doing life correctly. This shift often happens when cleanliness becomes tied to identity rather than simply comfort. Instead of thinking, a tidy space helps me feel calm, the belief quietly becomes, if my space is not tidy, something is wrong with me. That single shift changes everything. Once cleanliness becomes tangled up with self-worth, it stops being a tool and starts being a test. And tests create anxiety, not relief. This is often where perfectionism enters the picture. Psychologists have long noted the connection between perfectionistic tendencies and an intense need for order. It is rarely about the mess itself. It is about what the mess represents. Loss of control, falling behind, not measuring up. Someone with these tendencies might look at an untidy room and feel something closer to shame than annoyance, as if the state of the room is a direct reflection of their worth as a person. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it reframes the entire idea of cleanliness. It is never really about the object. It is about what the object represents to the mind observing it. A pile of laundry can mean nothing to one person and feel like proof of failure to another. The laundry itself has not changed. The meaning attached to it has. Now here is something even more fascinating. Cleanliness is not only personal, it is deeply social. Human beings are wired to care about how others perceive them. This goes back to our evolutionary need to belong to a group, because for most of history, being excluded from the group meant losing access to protection, resources, and survival itself. A tidy space can unconsciously signal to others that you are capable, responsible, and in control of your life. Even if that is not the intention, the brain of the observer often makes that association automatically. This is why some people clean intensely before guests arrive, even if the guests would not have noticed the mess at all. It is not really about the guests. It is about a deeper, almost primal desire to be seen as someone who has their life together. Here is what makes this so human. We are not just managing our environments. We are managing the story other people tell about us, and the story we tell about ourselves. So when you see someone constantly straightening, organizing, wiping, adjusting, understand that you are not just watching a habit. You are watching a nervous system trying to create predictability in an unpredictable world. You are watching someone quietly protect their sense of self. And if this is you, if you recognize yourself in any part of this, there's something important to understand. Wanting order is not a flaw. It is not something to be embarrassed about. It is a natural human response to uncertainty, shaped by biology, memory, and the very real need to feel safe. But it helps to notice the difference between cleaning because it brings you peace, and cleaning because you are afraid of what it means if you stop. One is self-care. The other is self-protection dressed up as a chore. The goal is not to stop caring about order. The goal is to understand why you care, so that the habit serves you instead of quietly controlling you. Because in the end, the state of a room rarely tells the full story. What matters more is the relationship between the person and the space they live in. Whether that space feels like a sanctuary they choose to maintain, or a burden they feel forced to carry. And once you start noticing that difference in yourself, you start noticing it everywhere. In the way people organize their calendars, in the way they plan their routines down to the minute, in the way some people cannot relax until every task on their list has been completed. Which brings up an entirely different question, one that goes even deeper than cleanliness. Why do some people feel a constant, almost restless need to stay busy, to always be productive, to feel guilty the moment they slow down? That question opens a door into something even more revealing about the human mind, and it might explain a part of yourself you have never fully understood.